I'm Joshua, 35, and my own father texted me that I was dead to the family just days before a major reunion. Before I tell you about how I walked away from a $4 million trap and watched their empire crumble, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I can pinpoint the exact second my father decided my run as a member of his family was over. It was a Wednesday afternoon. The clock on my office wall read exactly 3:30 p.m. Outside my glass-walled office, the Chicago skyline looked like a giant, glowing circuit board. I had just landed a massive promotion at the firm I had sacrificed my 20s for. I was standing by my desk, holding a cup of lukewarm coffee, when my phone vibrated against the wood. I glanced down. The name on the screen simply read Charles. Not Dad. Never Dad. I swiped open the notification. The message consisted of exactly 10 words. Don't bother coming to the family reunion. We're done with you. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. I stared at the glowing pixels on the screen. There was no greeting. There was no signature. There wasn't even a passive-aggressive emoji to soften the blow. It was completely sterile, sharp, and brutally efficient. It was exactly the kind of message Charles Bennett would send to a vendor who missed a shipping deadline. If he could have legally terminated my existence via a corporate memo, he absolutely would have. My assistant, Chloe, knocked softly and stepped into the office. She held a stack of client contracts in her arms. She looked at my face, her smile faltering instantly. Joshua, is everything okay? I looked away from the phone and met her eyes. I took a deep breath. I expected to feel the familiar crush of rejection. I expected my chest to tighten, the way it always did when I failed to meet my father's impossible standards. But instead, a strange, cool sensation washed over me. It started at the back of my neck and spread down my spine. It was relief. Deep, unadulterated relief. Everything is perfectly fine, Chloe, I said. My voice was completely steady. Let's review those contracts. I slipped the phone into my pocket. I didn't type out a tearful reply. I didn't beg for an explanation. I didn't apologize for whatever imaginary slight I had committed this time. I simply went back to work, because that was the Bennett family way. You ignored the bleeding wound, you put on a suit, and you focused on the bottom line. But this time, the bottom line was mine. It wasn't until hours later, when I unlocked the door to my quiet apartment, that the reality of those 10 words finally settled into my bones. We're done with you. I tossed my keys onto the kitchen counter. I didn't turn on the main lights. The glow of the street lamps filtering through the blinds was enough. I walked over to the large window overlooking the city. Millions of people were out there, eating dinner with their families, complaining about their parents, living normal lives. And then there was me, a line item on my father's balance sheet that had just been erased. For my entire life, my father had dangled his approval in front of me like a carrot on a stick. Be more assertive like your brother, Joshua. Work harder. Secure that promotion, but don't act too proud of it. I had twisted myself into 100 different shapes trying to fit into his mold. But the game was rigged from the start. I was never meant to win. I was only meant to play. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The message was still there. Staring at it now, the relief I felt in the office solidified into something much harder, turned into absolute clarity. If we were done, then we were truly done. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name Carter. Carter wasn't just my best friend. He was a ruthless corporate lawyer. He usually handled brutal corporate litigation and the occasional high-stakes custody battle for our top clients. He knew exactly how entangled I was in the Bennett family business. He was the only person who had ever looked me in the eye and told me my family was toxic. I hit dial. He answered on the second ring. Tell me you're not still at the office, Carter said, the sound of a sports game playing in the background of his line. I'm home, I said. I leaned my forehead against the cold glass of the window. Carter, I need you to pull the trigger. The background noise on his end instantly muted. Pull the trigger on what, exactly? Everything, I said, my grip tightening on the phone. The personal guarantee, the credit lines, The indemnity clause. I want my name stripped off every single document connected to Bennett and Sons. First thing tomorrow morning. A heavy silence stretched across the line. It was the kind of silence you only get from a friend who understands the exact magnitude of what you are asking. Joshua, Carter said, his voice dropping an octave. You know what this means, right? Your father's entire supply chain relies on that line of credit. If you yank your personal guarantee, the bank is going to freeze their accounts by lunch. It's going to be a bloodbath. I know, I replied. They are going to come after you, Carter warned. They will threaten you. They will try to destroy your reputation. Pulling your name off that loan right now is like pulling the pin out of a hand grenade and tossing it onto their dining table. I don't care where the grenade rolls anymore, Carter, I said. Charles texted me today. He told me I'm dead to them. He told me not to come to the reunion. Carter let out a low whistle. He actually put it in writing? Yes. Then he just handed you the key to your own jail cell, Carter said, his tone shifting from cautious friend to predatory lawyer. I'll draft the revocation notices tonight. I'll have them on the desk of their lead accountant and the bank manager by 8 a.m. Get some sleep, Joshua. Tomorrow is going to be a war. I hung up the phone. I walked into my kitchen, opened a bottle of Cabernet, and poured myself a generous glass. I didn't drink whiskey. Charles drank whiskey, and I no longer wanted any part of him in my system. I took a sip and let the warmth settle in my chest. At that moment, I still didn't know the full extent of their deception. I didn't know that pulling my name off that paper was going to expose a rot so deep it would tear the entire family tree out by the roots. I just knew that for the first time in 35 years, I could finally breathe. The silence in my apartment that night was deafening. It left too much room for memories I usually kept locked away. I sat on my leather sofa, the glass of wine resting on my knee, and let my mind drift back to the moment I first realized the hierarchy of the Bennett family. I was 14 years old. It was a sweltering July afternoon. I had just sprinted all the way home from the mailbox, clutching a thick envelope bearing the seal of an elite summer academic program at Northwestern University. They only accepted 50 kids in the state. I had spent 6 months writing the essays, studying late into the night while my older brother, Elijah, blasted music in the room next door. I burst through the front door, gasping for air, waving the acceptance letter like a winning lottery ticket. My father was sitting in his leather armchair in the study, reviewing quarterly reports. My mother, Sarah, was arranging flowers on the coffee table. Dad, Mom, look, I shouted, shoving the letter onto the desk right over his spreadsheets. I got in. Full scholarship for the summer. Charles didn't even lift his head. He slowly pushed the letter aside with his index finger, his eyes remaining glued to the financial figures. Keep your voice down, Joshua. I'm calculating the quarterly projections. My smile froze. I looked at my mother, desperate for a lifeline. She offered a tight, sympathetic smile, but kept her hands busy with the roses. That's nice, honey, she murmured. But don't make too much of a fuss right now. Your brother is having a hard day. Right on cue, Elijah stomped down the stairs. He was 17, built like a linebacker, and carried an air of arrogant entitlement that my parents actively cultivated. He threw his gym bag onto the pristine hardwood floor. Coach said I'm only alternate for the state basketball camp, Elijah grumbled, kicking the leg of the sofa. Immediately, the atmosphere in the room shifted. My father dropped his pen. My mother abandoned the flowers and rushed over to Elijah, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. It's politics, son, Charles said, his voice instantly warming with a paternal pride he never directed at me. The coach is an idiot. We'll make a few calls. Don't you worry about it. And don't stress about the future. Your college fund is completely secure, and there's always a corner office waiting for you at the company. I stood there holding my acceptance letter. My achievement was utterly invisible, eclipsed by Elijah's minor inconvenience. My college fund was a fraction of his, justified by my parents because I was smart enough to get scholarships. I realized then that Elijah was the golden child, the heir apparent. I was just the spare part, the backup plan. The bitter memory shifted into something more recent, something far more dangerous. 3 years ago, I was 32, finally making a name for myself outside of the family shadow. I had stopped asking for their approval and started building my own life. But the Bennett family had a way of reeling you back in just when you thought you had swam far enough away. It was a Sunday morning. I had been guilt-tripped into attending a family breakfast at my parents' estate. The dining room smelled of expensive bacon and fresh espresso. I was quietly eating my eggs when Charles slid a thick manila folder across the polished mahogany table. It stopped right next to my plate. "Sign the last page," Charles said. He didn't look at me. He was busy buttering his toast. I wiped my mouth and opened the folder. It was a massive commercial loan document for $1 million. The borrower was Bennett and Sons. The guarantor line had my name printed neatly beneath it. I frowned, reading the dense legal jargon. "Dad, what is this? Why is my name on a corporate loan for the family business? I don't own shares. I don't work there." Elijah let out a loud, mocking laugh from across the table. "Look at him, reading it like he actually understands it. Just sign the paper, Josh. It's standard procedure." "Elijah is right," Charles said smoothly, his tone patronizing. "The company is expanding. We are acquiring a new logistics warehouse. The bank just likes to see the whole family committed. It's a formality, a show of unity. It will actually be good for your image. Someday, when we discuss your inheritance, you'll be glad you showed loyalty today." He used the word inheritance like a hook. He knew exactly what buttons to push. I hesitated. My gut screamed at me to push the folder back. But then my mother, Sarah, reached out and placed her warm hand over mine. Her eyes were wide, soft, and brimming with manufactured anxiety. "Please, Joshua," she whispered, her voice trembling perfectly. "Don't make this difficult. Your father has been under so much stress. The doctor said his blood pressure is high. Just sign it for the family. We raised you. We gave you everything. Don't be selfish." Selfish, the magic word. Saying no would turn me into the villain instantly. I would be the ungrateful son trying to sabotage the family empire. I picked up the heavy gold pen sitting next to the folder. My hand felt numb. I pressed the tip to the paper and signed my name. Charles immediately snatched the folder back, his face returning to its usual cold, satisfied mask. He had what he wanted. I took the last sip of my wine, pulling myself out of the memories. I looked down at my hands. Those were the hands that had signed away my financial security just to keep the peace. I had betrayed myself. I had traded my own safety for the illusion of family unity. But tonight was different. Tonight the chain was broken. When Charles sent that text, he thought he was punishing me. He thought the threat of exclusion would crush me, send me crawling back, begging for a scrap of his affection. He didn't realize he had accidentally given me permission to stop caring. I stood up and walked to the kitchen sink, rinsing out the wine glass. I felt a strange, thrilling energy vibrating in my chest. The fear that had governed my relationship with my family for 3 decades was simply gone. It had evaporated. I went into my bedroom, changed into my sleepwear, and lay down on the mattress. I didn't toss and turn. I didn't replay the text message in my head. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since I was a teenager, I slept through the entire night without a single nightmare. The storm did not arrive with a warning. It hit like a freight train at 8:15 a.m. the next morning. I was standing in my kitchen, brewing a pot of dark roast coffee, when my phone on the counter erupted. The screen flashed frantically. It was Gregory, my father's corporate lawyer. I watched it ring until it went to voicemail. 10 seconds later, it rang again. My mother, then my father, then Gregory again. I poured my coffee, leaned against the marble island, and unlocked my screen. 72 missed calls, 34 text messages. For voicemails, Carter had kept his word. The revocation notices had landed. I tapped the voicemail icon and put it on speakerphone. The first message was from Charles. "Joshua." His voice boomed through the small speaker, sharp and furious. "I am assuming you are acting out of sheer ignorance. The bank just contacted me. They are questioning our solvency. The board partners are panicking. You are endangering everything I built. You have 24 hours to retract this ridiculous stunt. After that, do not expect this to end well for you." He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask why I did it. He just saw a broken machine part that needed to be hammered back into place. The next voicemail was from my mother. The background was filled with the sound of her dramatic weeping. "Joshua, please, how could you do this to us? Your father is screaming at the accountant. Elijah is pacing the floors. You are destroying this family. Pick up the phone right now." I deleted both messages without a second thought. My heart rate didn't even spike. I took a sip of my coffee. Tasted fantastic. Then came the texts from Elijah. They were a frantic, misspelled stream of consciousness. "What the hell did you do? The bank froze the main operating account. My company credit card just got declined at the dealership. You are tanking my salary, you piece of garbage. Call Dad back now." I stared at the messages. Elijah wasn't worried about the company's legacy. He was panicking because his luxury lifestyle was suddenly unfunded. He was terrified that his exorbitant salary, drawn from a company he barely worked for, was going to bounce. I typed a reply. It was the first time I had communicated with any of them since the text. "I'm dead to you, remember? Ghosts can't sign bank documents." I hit send and immediately blocked his number. The satisfaction that flooded my veins was electric. I felt like a man who had finally figured out how to defuse a bomb that had been strapped to his chest for years. Just as I was putting on my tie for work, Carter called. "Good morning, sunshine," Carter said, his voice practically vibrating with professional glee. "I hope you slept well, because the Bennett family compound is currently on fire." "I saw the missed calls," I said, adjusting my collar in the mirror. Charles left a voicemail threatening me. "Elijah's credit cards are bouncing." "Oh, it's better than that, Joshua," Carter said. I could hear him shuffling papers on his desk. "I just got off a back-channel call with Sterling over at the bank. He's the senior credit officer. When I pulled your guarantee, the bank's automated risk system flagged the entire Bennett portfolio for an immediate manual audit. And," I asked, pausing, "and they found the rot," Carter said, his tone turning dead serious. "Joshua, the company hasn't been expanding. That warehouse story Charles sold you 3 years ago? It was a complete fabrication. The money from that $4 million credit line has been bleeding out for the past 36 months. Cash withdrawals, offshore wire transfers, massive unexplained consulting fees paid to shell LLCs." I gripped the edge of the dresser. "Who?" "Your brother," Carter said flatly. "Elijah has been treating the corporate credit line like his personal casino fund. He's got massive gambling debts. Your father knew about it. He's been using the company's liquidity to cover Elijah's tracks so the board wouldn't find out." The air left my lungs. The room spun for a fraction of a second. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was deeply, violently financial. They hadn't asked me to guarantee a loan for the family's future. They had tricked me into co-signing Elijah's gambling debts. They had placed a $4 million noose around my neck to protect the golden child. "Are you still there?" Carter asked. My jaw clenched. A vein throbbed on my temple. The last shred of guilt I held for my family evaporated, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. "I'm here," I said softly. "They're going to come for you harder now," Carter warned. "They need your name back on that paper to stop the audit. If the audit finishes, Charles goes down for corporate fraud, and Elijah goes to prison. Let them come," I said. "I'm ready." Saturday morning arrived with heavy gray clouds hanging over Chicago. I was sitting at my kitchen island, reading a brief for work, when the buzzer to my apartment rang. I walked over to the intercom monitor. Standing in the lobby, wearing a pale cashmere coat and a perfectly styled expression of tragedy, was my mother, Sarah. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but hiding wasn't going to solve this. I pressed the button to unlock the lobby doors. 5 minutes later, there was a soft, hesitant knock on my door. I opened it. She stood there, her eyes already welling up with tears. She reached out to hug me, but I stepped back, leaving her arms hovering in the empty air. "Joshua," she whimpered, her voice cracking. "Please, let me come in. You can say whatever you need to say from the hallway, Mom," I said, crossing my arms over my chest. She blinked, shocked by the boundary. She quickly recovered, pressing a tissue to her eyes. "You are breaking your father's heart. He hasn't slept in 2 days. The lawyers are crawling all over the house. Why are you doing this? We are family." "Family?" I echoed, letting out a harsh laugh. "Dad texted me that I was dead to him, that I wasn't welcome at the reunion. Did you know he sent that?" She looked away, staring at the baseboards. "He was just angry, Joshua. You know how he gets. He's under a lot of pressure at work. You need to be the bigger person. You need to call the bank and fix this. Don't be childish." The word hit me like a physical strike. Childish. I took a step forward, towering over her. "You want to know what's childish, Mom? Covering up your 38-year-old son's gambling debts by lying to your other son. Using your own child as collateral so Elijah doesn't have to face the consequences of his actions." Her head snapped up, her face drained of color. The tears instantly vanished, replaced by sheer panic. Who told you that?" "It doesn't matter," I said coldly. "The truth is out. You didn't come here because you love me. You came here because you need your human shield back in place." "Joshua, please," she begged, dropping the tissue. "If the bank pulls that loan, the company goes bankrupt. We'll lose the house. We'll lose everything. Then you better start packing," I said. I stepped back and grabbed the door handle. "Have a safe drive home, Sarah." I shut the door in her face. I didn't feel a single ounce of regret. 2 hours later, there was another knock on the door. This time, I didn't bother checking the monitor. I swung the door open, expecting Charles. Instead, Uncle Robert stood in the hallway, holding 2 large cups of coffee from my favorite local cafe. Robert was Charles's younger brother. He had always played the role of the affable, laid-back uncle, the peacemaker. Whenever Charles blew up, Robert was the one who smoothed things over. "Tough morning?" Uncle Robert asked, offering a warm, sympathetic smile. I hesitated, but let him in. I needed to see what angle the family was playing now. Robert walked into the living room, setting the coffees on the table. He sighed heavily, rubbing the back of his neck. "Listen, kid. I know Charles crossed a line. That text was brutal. I told him he was out of his mind to send it." "Glad someone did," I muttered, sitting on the armchair across from him. "He's a proud man, Joshua. He doesn't know how to apologize," Robert said, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "But he wants to fix this. The whole family does. We don't want a divorce in the family, so to speak. Your mom is a wreck. Let's just put the swords down." Robert reached into his inside jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. He placed it carefully on the coffee table between us. "What is that?" I asked, my eyes narrowing. "It's a peace treaty," Robert said gently. "It's an internal family agreement. It stipulates that Charles will officially apologize, and in exchange, you temporarily pause the revocation notice with the bank. Just for 30 days. Give the company time to restructure. Nobody gets hurt. You just sign at the bottom, and the nightmare is over." He held out a pen. His eyes were incredibly kind. For a split second, the little boy inside me wanted to believe him. I wanted to take the pen and end the conflict. Before I could move, my bedroom door opened. Carter walked out holding his laptop. He had been working from my apartment all morning to draft our defense strategy. Robert's smile vanished instantly. "Who is this?" "I'm his lawyer," Carter said cheerfully. He walked over to the coffee table and snatched the document before Robert could grab it back. Carter scanned the text. His eyes darted across the page, his expression turning lethal. Carter threw the paper back onto the table. This isn't a peace treaty, Robert. This is a trap. Clause 4.2 constitutes a reaffirmation of the original debt. If Joshua signs this, he legally waives his right to revoke the guarantee permanently. He'd be locked in forever. I stared at Robert. The kind, affable uncle mask melted away, revealing the same cold, calculating genetics that ran through my father's veins. He had tried to trick me. "Get out of my apartment," I said. My voice was dangerously quiet. Robert stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked annoyed that he got caught. "You're making a massive mistake, Joshua. You're going to burn alone." "At least I'll hold the matches," I replied. By Tuesday afternoon, the harassment reached a fever pitch. Charles's lawyer, Gregory, sent a formal demand for an in-person mediation. Refusal would result in immediate civil litigation for breach of fiduciary duty. It was an empty threat, but Carter insisted we go. "We need to cut the head off the snake in person," Carter had said. "We need to look them in the eye and show them you aren't afraid anymore." The meeting was set for 4 p.m. at an executive suite in the Conrad Hotel. Carter and I walked through the opulent marble lobby. The air smelled of expensive cedar and wealth. We rode the elevator in silence to the penthouse level. When the heavy mahogany doors of the suite swung open, the tension in the room hit me like a physical wall. Charles stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his hands clasped behind his back, exuding dominance. Gregory, his attack dog lawyer, sat at a massive oak conference table, his briefcase open, files scattered aggressively. My mother sat in the corner, clutching her designer purse, looking appropriately traumatized. Elijah was not there. Of course he wasn't. The coward was probably hiding in his condo. "Joshua," Charles said. He didn't offer his hand. He gestured sharply to the empty chairs. "Sit down. Let's get this over with." I didn't sit. I buttoned my suit jacket and remained standing. Carter stood beside me, his posture completely relaxed, a stark contrast to Gregory's aggressive stance. "We won't be staying long," I said. Gregory cleared his throat loudly. "Mr. Bennett, your reckless actions have caused quantifiable financial damage to Bennett and Sons. The bank is halting all operational lines. We have drafted a lawsuit for tortious interference. If you do not sign a reinstatement of your guarantee right now, we will file it in the morning, and we will ruin your career." He shoved a pen across the table. It rolled and stopped at the edge. I looked at the pen. Then I looked at my father. "Is that it? You invite me here to threaten me with a baseless lawsuit?" "It's not baseless, you ungrateful brat," Charles hissed, stepping away from the window. The mask was slipping. His face was red. "I gave you a life. I gave you a name. You owe this family. You owe me." Carter let out a sharp, genuine laugh. The sound echoed loudly in the tense room. "He owes you nothing, Charles," Carter said smoothly. He opened his sleek leather briefcase and pulled out a single, thick red folder. He tossed it onto the center of the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "What is this nonsense?" Gregory demanded. At that exact moment, the doors to the suite opened again. A tall, distinguished man with silver hair walked in. He carried an air of absolute authority. It was Mr. Sterling, the senior executive credit officer from the bank. Charles's jaw dropped. Gregory scrambled to stand up. "Mr. Sterling, what are you doing here? This is a private family mediation." "It ceased to be private when you attempted to defraud my institution, Charles," Sterling said, his voice cold and clipped. He didn't even look at Gregory. He looked straight at my father. I turned to Charles. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" I asked, my voice ringing clear and steady in the room. Carter pointed to the red folder. "That is the forensic audit report from the bank, commissioned yesterday morning. It details every single unauthorized withdrawal Elijah made to his bookies. But that's not the best part." Carter pulled a specific document from the folder and held it up. It was the original guarantee I had signed 3 years ago. We pulled the original loan origination files, Carter continued, his eyes locked on Charles. The $4 million line of credit wasn't secured by the company's assets. Charles secretly stripped the corporate collateral out of the contract before Joshua signed it. The only thing securing that $4 million was Joshua. The silence in the room was absolute. It was suffocating. I stared at my father. The final puzzle piece snapped into place. It was the ultimate betrayal. "You didn't just ask me to co-sign," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying across the room. "You put the entire debt exclusively on my shoulders. If Elijah defaulted, the bank wouldn't take the company. They would take my house, my savings, my entire future. You set me up to take the bullet for him." Charles opened his mouth, but for the first time in my life, I watched my father stutter. The great patriarch, the terrifying dictator, was suddenly just an old man caught in a lie. "Joshua, you don't understand corporate finance," Charles stammered. It was a strategic allocation of risk." "Stop," I commanded. My voice cracked like a whip. Charles actually flinched. I turned slowly to look at my mother. She was staring out the window, refusing to look at me. Her hands were shaking violently. "You knew," I said. It wasn't a question. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Elijah was in so much trouble, Joshua. Dangerous people were looking for him. We had to protect him. You are strong. You always survive. Elijah is fragile. My own mother. She had willingly offered me up as a sacrifice to save her favorite child. The disgust that washed over me was so profound it almost made me dizzy. I looked back at Charles. "The revocation stands. I am officially disconnected from your company, your debt, and your lives. You can't do this." Charles screamed, slamming his fist on the table. "You're my son." "No," I replied, looking him dead in the eye. "I'm dead to you. Remember." I turned on my heel and walked out of the suite. Carter followed right behind me. We didn't look back. As the heavy doors swung shut, I heard the sound of my mother sobbing and Sterling demanding Charles' hand over the corporate ledgers. "De la Cohen kak the doi tatsier, kai tua koi kung de lay lai duak win kim so kuak doi min. Kam on ban de kien and kung tua den day. Ban that tuet voi. Hey jup tua like video va ben luan so one ben dui. De tua beat ban de dong han kung tua toi day. Junai kong chi jup nu nuoi han tim thay ka chuyen nai. Ma kan cho tua beat rang and hung tre niam qua tua ko wai nia voi ai du. Suung ho qua ben la dong luk lan not de tua tip tiu si chia se and hung fan kan lai qua han trin nai. The fallout was spectacular and immediate. By Wednesday morning, Charles realized he had completely lost control of the narrative, the bank, and me. So, he resorted to the only weapon he had left, public character assassination. I was sitting at my desk at my firm when my phone chimed. It was an email. The sender was Charles. The CC list included every single aunt, uncle, cousin, and family friend in our extensive directory. Over 80 people. The subject line read, "The Betrayal of Joshua Bennett." I opened it and read it while sipping my morning coffee. It was a masterpiece of narcissistic fiction. Charles painted a heartbreaking picture of a loving family brutally abandoned by an arrogant, greedy son. He claimed I had demanded a massive, unearned payout from the company, and when denied, I maliciously sabotaged their banking relationships out of spite. He didn't mention Elijah. He didn't mention the fraud. He ended the email by asking for prayers for our family during this devastating time of heartbreak. 10 minutes later, the extended family group chat exploded. My phone buzzed so violently it danced across my desk. Aunt Sharon was the first to attack. "I always knew there was something wrong with you, Joshua. How could you do this to your mother? You are a monster." Cousin Greg chimed in next. "Lawyering up against your own dad? You're garbage, man." Message after message poured in. Judgments, condemnations, threats. Anyone who might have secretly questioned Charles's narrative remained dead silent. The chat room felt like a digital funeral for my reputation. They were burying me alive, and everyone was grabbing a shovel. I watched the notifications scroll by. I didn't feel angry. I felt an overwhelming sense of pity for them. They were trapped in Charles's cult, completely blind to the fact that they were worshipping a man who would throw any of them to the wolves if it served his bottom line. I opened the group chat settings. I didn't defend myself. I didn't post the audit report. I simply tapped Leave Group. Then, I blocked Charles's email address. The silence that followed was beautiful. I packed up my briefcase early that afternoon. I needed to get out of the city. I needed space to let the adrenaline finally leave my system. As I was walking to my car in the parking garage, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it, assuming it was another flying monkey sent by Charles. But something made me swipe right. "Hello," I said cautiously. "Hey, it's Rebecca." I stopped walking. Rebecca was my older cousin. She had always been the black sheep of the extended family because she refused to attend the mandatory Sunday dinners and moved to Seattle years ago. "I saw the email," Rebecca said. Her voice was calm and steady. "I assume you're calling to tell me how much of a monster I am," I replied, leaning against the cold concrete pillar. Rebecca let out a sharp, genuine laugh. "Are you kidding? I'm calling to congratulate you. You finally did it. You broke out of the asylum." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "You don't believe him?" "Joshua, I've known Charles is a manipulative sociopath since I was 12, she said softly. "Everyone in that group chat knows he's toxic, but they are all too terrified of him to say it out loud. They rely on his money. You hit him where it hurts. You took your power back." A wave of profound validation washed over me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the villain. "They're going down, Rebecca," I said. "The bank is auditing them. Elijah's fraud is exposed." "Good," she said fiercely. "Let it burn. You protect yourself. Change your number. Disappear for a while. You earned it." "Thank you," I whispered. "Welcome to the real world, cousin," she replied and hung up. I got into my car. I threw my phone onto the passenger seat. I started the engine, pulled out of the dark parking garage, and drove toward the highway. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but as I merged onto the interstate and watched the Chicago skyline shrink in my rearview mirror, I knew one thing for certain. I was never going back. I left the parking garage of my office building and merged onto the I-94 heading north. I didn't have a specific destination mapped out on my GPS, but my hands seemed to know exactly how to steer the wheel. The concrete jungle of Chicago slowly began to fade in my rearview mirror, replaced by the sprawling, open highways of the Midwest. The sky above was a heavy, bruised purple, threatening rain, but inside my car, the atmosphere felt incredibly light. For the first time in my entire life, I wasn't driving toward an obligation. I wasn't rushing to a mandatory family dinner where my salary would be mocked or my career achievements ignored. I was just driving. My hands gripped the leather steering wheel, and I realized my knuckles weren't white anymore. The chronic tension that usually lived in my shoulders, a permanent knot forged by 35 years of walking on eggshells around Charles Bennett, was beginning to dissolve. I rolled down the window just a crack. The rush of cold air hit my face, smelling like wet asphalt and impending rain. It was the smell of a clean slate. About 2 hours later, I pulled onto a dirt road winding deep into the woods near Lake Geneva. A senior partner at my firm had offered me the keys to his private hunting cabin months ago, telling me to use it whenever the city noise became too loud. I hadn't taken him up on it until now. The tires crunched over the gravel as I navigated the winding path, the dense canopy of pine trees blocking out the remaining daylight. I parked the car in front of a modest, dark wood cabin. There was no grand entrance, no manicured lawns like the ones at my father's estate. It was just a sturdy structure built to withstand the elements. I grabbed my duffel bag from the trunk, the metal latch clicking loudly in the absolute silence of the woods. I unlocked the heavy front door and stepped inside. The cabin smelled faintly of cedar, old with smoke and dust. It was completely isolated. The cell service indicator on my phone immediately dropped to a single, blinking bar. It was the perfect fortress. I tossed my bag onto a worn leather sofa and walked straight out to the back deck. The wooden planks creaked under my boots. Below me, the dark, glassy surface of the lake reflected the moon. There was no traffic, no sirens, no screaming matches, just the sound of water gently lapping against the shore. I went back inside and rummaged through the small pantry. I found a can of black bean soup, opened it, and heated it in a small aluminum pot on the electric stove. I ate it straight from the pot, leaning against the kitchen counter. It was a $3 meal, but it tasted better than any dry, tense Thanksgiving turkey I had ever forced down at my parents' dining table. Just as I was washing the spoon in the sink, my phone buzzed against the countertop. The sudden noise made me jump. I dried my hands on a paper towel and walked over to the device. The screen illuminated the dark kitchen. It was a text message from my cousin, Nathan. Nathan had always been the family chameleon. He was the guy who would gladly sit next to Charles at dinner, nodding along with his toxic rants just to ensure he remained favorable in the inheritance discussions. But then, an hour later, Nathan would pull me aside in the hallway, clap me on the shoulder, and whisper, "Man, your dad is totally out of line." He played both sides of the fence, surviving the Bennett family dynamics by being useful to whoever held the most power at any given moment. I stared at the screen and read the message. "Hey man, just checking in. The family group chat is going absolutely insane right now. Your dad is threatening to cut everyone out of the will if they even speak your name. Are you doing okay? Where are you staying tonight? Let's grab a beer when you get a chance." A year ago, I would have fallen right into the trap. I would have felt a desperate surge of gratitude that someone, anyone, in the family was checking on me. I would have immediately texted back my exact location, pouring my heart out, desperate for validation. But looking at the message now, in the quiet of the cabin, the manipulation was glaringly obvious. Carter's warning echoed in my mind. They are going to come for you harder now. Nathan wasn't reaching out to be a supportive cousin. He was acting as a scout for the opposing army. Charles needed to know my physical location. He needed to know where to send Gregory with more legal threats, or worse, he was planning to show up himself to physically intimidate me back into signing that loan guarantee. Nathan was fishing for my address to deliver it directly to the patriarch on a silver platter. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I didn't feel angry at Nathan. I just felt exhausted by the game. I typed out a very brief, sterile reply. "I'm doing great, Nathan. Tell Charles the first said hello." I hit send. Then, without a second of hesitation, I tapped his contact name, scrolled down past his phone number and email address, and firmly pressed block caller. The screen flashed, confirming the action. But I didn't stop there. I walked over to the sofa, sat down, and opened my entire contact directory. For the next 45 minutes, I executed a ruthless digital purge. I scrolled through hundreds of names, identifying every single aunt, uncle, cousin, and family friend who was financially or emotionally tethered to Charles Bennett. Aunt Sharon, blocked. Cousin Greg, blocked. My parents' country club friends, blocked. I severed the digital cords one by one with the precision of a surgeon removing a malignant tumor. When I was finally finished, the contact list was beautifully light. I placed the phone face down on the coffee table. It didn't buzz again for the rest of the weekend. I spent the next 2 days completely disconnected from the grid. I chopped firewood. I hiked the trails around the lake, letting the physical exertion burn off the residual adrenaline in my muscles. I read old paperback thrillers I found on the cabin's bookshelf. And most importantly, I slept. I slept for 10, sometimes 12 hours a night. I didn't wake up at 3 a.m. drenched in cold sweat, worrying about my father's expectations or my brother's manufactured crises. The phantom weight that had crushed my chest for 3 decades was completely gone. I was finally healing. 3 months passed. It is incredible how differently time moves when you are no longer living in a constant state of emotional combat. The days stopped feeling like a battlefield and started feeling like a blank canvas. It was a crisp Tuesday morning in October. I was sitting behind the desk in my corner office in downtown Chicago. The city was bustling below me, completely oblivious to the absolute corporate carnage that was currently unfolding a few miles away at the headquarters of Bennett & Sons. I was reviewing a contract when my private desk line rang. I picked up the receiver. "Have you checked the financial industry news this morning?" Carter's voice boomed through the speaker. He sounded like a kid who had just found the winning ticket to a massive lottery. "I've been in back-to-back client meetings since 8, I said, leaning back in my ergonomic chair and stretching my legs. "Give me the highlight reel, Carter." "The forensic bank audit officially wrapped up late last Friday," Carter began, dropping into his sharp, professional storytelling rhythm. And Joshua, Sterling absolutely did not hold back. Once the bank realized that the $4 million collateral was entirely dependent on a son who had legally severed all ties, they tore the company ledgers apart. They dug into every single account, every offshore wire transfer, every petty cash receipt. I let out a slow, steady breath. What exactly did they find? "They found the entire rot," Carter said, a dark amusement coloring his tone. "They found the shell LLCs that Elijah was using to funnel the company cash directly to his bookies in Vegas. They found out your brother was expensing massive luxury vacations, sports cars, and high-stakes poker buy-ins under the guise of corporate marketing research. And the worst part? Charles signed off on every single fraudulent expense report to keep the board of directors in the dark." I closed my eyes, picturing Elijah. I pictured him sitting in his luxury downtown condo, holding a crystal glass of bourbon, suddenly realizing that his massive, unearned salary had just vanished into thin air. He had spent his entire life bullying me, believing he was completely untouchable because he carried the golden child status. Now the gold had peeled off, exposing the rust underneath. "How bad is the fallout?" I asked. "It's a total catastrophic collapse," Carter replied. "The bank formally called in the entire commercial loan. Immediate repayment demanded in full. Since Charles had illegally stripped the actual corporate assets from the original guarantee to put the crosshairs exclusively on you, the company didn't have the liquidity to cover the $4 million. They couldn't even make the employee payroll last Friday. The checks bounced." "And Elijah?" I pressed, needing to know the fate of the man who had gladly watched our father offer me up as a sacrificial lamb. "Oh, the golden boy is facing the music in the worst way possible," Carter laughed sharply. The board of directors held an emergency, closed-door meeting on Sunday morning. When Sterling presented the audit report proving Elijah had actively embezzled company funds, they terminated him on the spot. No severance package, no golden parachute, no graceful exit. Carter paused, letting the weight of the next sentence hang in the air. "The company's legal counsel is officially cooperating with federal authorities. Elijah's personal assets are being seized by the creditors. His luxury cars, his condo, his investment portfolios. It's all gone. And from what I hear through the grapevine, his wife filed for a brutal divorce yesterday morning. She is demanding full custody of the kids and whatever is left of his hidden college fund accounts. He is completely ruined." A profound, quiet sense of justice washed over me. I didn't take joy in his misery, but I had spent a lifetime paying the emotional and financial price for his mistakes. Seeing him finally face the devastating consequences of his own actions, without Charles there to buy his way out of trouble, was deeply satisfying. "And Charles?" I asked softly. The line was quiet for a moment. "Charles tried to play the victim," Carter said, his voice turning grim. "He stood up in front of the board and tried to claim he had absolutely no idea what Elijah was doing. He tried to throw his own son under the bus to save his CEO title. But Sterling had the paper trail. Charles's signature was on every single fraudulent wire transfer. The board forced him to step down immediately. They stripped him of his controlling shares. The great Charles Bennett, the terrifying patriarch who had texted me that I was a line item, that I was dead to his family. He had sacrificed his entire legacy, his wealth, and his pristine corporate reputation to protect a son who was actively destroying him from the inside out. To keep Elijah out of a federal penitentiary, Charles had to completely liquidate his own personal portfolio, Carter concluded. He had to heavily leverage the family estate just to pay back the bank penalties and avoid criminal fraud charges. That massive inheritance he always dangled over your head to keep you obedient is completely wiped out, Joshua. It went straight into the pockets of Vegas bookies and corporate lawyers. He has nothing left but a heavily mortgaged house and a son who currently blames him for not bailing him out of the divorce. He built a house out of matches, I said, looking out my office window at the clear blue sky above the Chicago skyline. And he handed Elijah the lighter. You got out right before the entire ship went under, Carter said. I didn't just get out, Carter, I replied, a genuine smile finally breaking across my face. I took the only life raft with me. While their toxic world was burning to the ground, my own world was finally taking flight. Without the constant, exhausting drain of my family's manufactured drama, my career trajectory skyrocketed. I was no longer distracted by random, hysterical crisis calls from my mother during important client negotiations. I was no longer emotionally depleted from spending my weekends navigating Charles's psychological minefields. All that intense energy, all that desperate focus I used to waste trying to earn a drop of their approval, was suddenly channeled directly into my work and my own personal growth. 6 months after the brutal confrontation at the Conrad Hotel, the senior partners at my firm called me into the main executive boardroom. They had noticed the massive shift in my performance over the past 2 quarters. I was sharper, more aggressive in negotiations, and I was closing high-net-worth deals at a record-breaking pace. The managing partner slid a thick folder across the table. It wasn't a fraudulent loan guarantee. It was an offer for a massive promotion. It came with a substantial equity stake in the firm, a title change to senior partner, and a salary increase that made my previous income look like spare change. I didn't have to share the news with parents who would immediately belittle the achievement. I didn't have to downplay my success just so Elijah wouldn't throw a jealous tantrum at the dinner table. I signed the contract with a steady hand. That evening, I celebrated by taking Carter and my assistant, Chloe, to the most exclusive, expensive steakhouse in the downtown district. We ordered the best champagne on the menu. We raised our glasses and toasted to freedom, to the establishment of ironclad boundaries, and to the absolute, life-changing power of walking away. A few weeks after the promotion, I closed on a new apartment. I moved out of my old place, the place where my mother had cried in the hallway and my uncle had tried to hand me a poisoned contract, and I bought a sprawling penthouse loft in the West Loop. It had exposed brick walls, massive industrial steel windows, and was flooded with warm, natural sunlight all day long. I remember the very first night I spent there. The moving crew had just left. The massive loft was mostly empty, containing only a mattress on the floor and a few cardboard boxes scattered around. I ordered a simple pepperoni pizza and sat on the bare hardwood floor, looking around my new kingdom. It was quiet, but it wasn't a lonely, isolating quiet. It was the peaceful, resonant silence of a life that belonged entirely to me. Every single brick in the wall, every pane of glass in the window, every square foot of this beautiful space was earned by my own hands, completely free from the toxic strings and financial manipulation of the Bennett family name. I had successfully built a fortress of peace. And the best part? No one from my past had the address. It had been exactly 1 year since the text message that ignited the destruction of my old life. I was sitting at my sleek new marble kitchen island, drinking a freshly brewed espresso and reviewing a dense legal case file for a new client. My laptop chimed with an incoming email notification. I glanced at the screen. The message had bypassed my strict spam filters because it came from a completely new, unrecognized email address. But the moment I read the sender's name in the preview pane, I knew exactly who it was. Joshua, the email began. It's your father. I stopped reading and just stared at the glowing pixels. A year ago, seeing an email from Charles Bennett would have sent my heart rate through the roof. My palms would have started sweating, and my mind would have frantically started analyzing what I had done wrong. Today, my pulse didn't even flutter. My hands were perfectly steady. I took a calm sip of my espresso, clicked open the message, and read the rest of the text. Things have been incredibly difficult here at the estate. The company was officially taken over by the board of directors last month. Elijah is currently living in the guest room above the garage. His divorce was finalized, and he refuses to speak to me. Your mother cries in the living room every single day. We are facing imminent foreclosure on the house by the end of the quarter. He paused there, dedicating a new paragraph to his grand finale. I know we had our differences in the past, Joshua. I know things were said in anger on both sides. But looking at the state of things, it feels like the funeral of our entire family legacy. You are still a Bennett. You are still my son. We desperately need your help. We need a temporary bridge loan from you to keep the bank from taking the house. Let's meet for lunch this week and put all this ugliness behind us. Blood is thicker than water. I leaned back in my leather chair and let out a dry, humorless chuckle. He still didn't get it. After everything he had done, after actively trying to frame me for $4 million of corporate fraud, after sending a defamatory email destroying my character to our entire extended family, after explicitly texting me that I was dead to him, he honestly, truly believed he could just snap his fingers and I would come running back. He thought he could summon me to open my checkbook and save him from the consequences of his own disastrous actions. He didn't miss his son. He missed his human ATM. He missed his reliable punching bag. He missed the one person who was always willing to set themselves on fire to keep him warm. I placed my coffee mug down on the marble counter. I opened a blank reply window. I didn't need to call Carter to consult on this one. I didn't need to draft a strategic legal defense. I just needed to close the heavy iron door on my past, permanently. I kept my response brief. I kept it brutally factual. I didn't use any emotion, because emotion was a currency he would try to spend. Charles, you made your choice exactly 1 year ago when you texted me that I was dead to you. I simply honored your request. You built a house of cards founded entirely on lies, fraud, and the exploitation of your own children, and you violently tried to force me to hold it up for you. Now that the house has collapsed, you have to live in the ruins. I did what I had to do to protect myself from your financial and emotional abuse. I do not regret my actions. I do not expect you to understand them, and frankly, I no longer care if you do. There will be no lunch meeting. There will be no bridge loan. Do not attempt to contact me ever again. Joshua. I didn't hesitate. I didn't obsessively read it over and over again the way I used to analyze my emails to him. I moved the cursor over the blue button and hit send. Then, I went into my settings and permanently blocked that new email address. That evening, I stood by the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of my loft, looking out as the sun slowly set over the Chicago skyline. The city lights began to flicker on, one by one, illuminating the vast grid of streets and towering skyscrapers. I thought about the man I was exactly a year ago, that anxious, terrified guy standing in his glass-walled office, gripping a cell phone, genuinely believing that losing the approval of his toxic family would completely destroy him. The profound truth was, walking away from toxic family members doesn't destroy you. It saves you. For 35 years, I had been conditioned to believe that blood obligated me to endure constant abuse. I believed the lie that if I just loved them enough, if I just sacrificed enough of my own happiness, if I just signed enough papers, they would finally see my worth and treat me with respect. But toxic people do not see your worth. They only see what they can extract from you. They view your empathy as a weakness to be exploited. My father hadn't disowned me with that cruel text message. He had accidentally handed me the master key to my own cage. By telling me I was dead to them, he had officially freed me to start living for myself. I looked down at the bustling city streets far below. I was no longer a supporting, tragic character in the Bennett family drama. I was the sole author of my own life, and the pages ahead were completely, beautifully blank, waiting for me to write whatever story I chose. Listen to me, guys. If there is one crucial thing my journey has taught me, it's that family is supposed to be a safe haven, not a psychological battlefield. Blood relation does not give anyone, not your father, not your mother, not your siblings, a free pass to manipulate, exploit, or disrespect you. We are so often conditioned by society to endure toxic behavior in the name of familial loyalty, but true loyalty should never require you to sacrifice your mental health, your financial security, or your fundamental self-worth. Setting strict boundaries is not an act of betrayal. It is an act of profound self-preservation. When you finally stop trying to win a game that was rigged against you from the start, you realize exactly how much incredible power you actually hold. Walking away from people who only value you for what you can provide is the hardest, but most necessary step toward finding your true peace. You deserve to be surrounded by people who celebrate your existence, not people who merely tolerate you when it's convenient for their bottom line. If you made it this far into the video, thank you for sitting down and letting me share my story with you. I want to know what you think about all of this. What was your biggest takeaway from this experience? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Or, if this story resonated with you, and you agree that protecting your peace and setting hard boundaries is crucial, just comment the word good down below so I know you're standing with me. Stay strong out there, protect your peace at all costs, and I'll see you in the next one.